Please welcome James Franco.
Hi. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I suspect you might have one or two fans in the audience. I'm not so good at reading an audience, but kind of have that sense. So this is adapted from a book of stories you wrote. So I wonder if you could sort of talk us through how it all kind of came together.
Sure. So I wrote the book. I started the book when I went back to UCLA, and I was working with a teacher named Mona Simpson, who coincidentally or incidentally is the sister of Steve Jobs, and she was my teacher. And I just started writing it there, and then I went on to grad school here in New York, and I finished the book largely under the guidance of a teacher named Amy Hempel. And I was really, going to school to write and just to write a book. I wasn't thinking about a movie. And then once I wrote the book and it came out, then I naturally thought about a movie. But I thought, I'd been doing a lot of collaboration at that point, and even adapting some other people's books. I think I had adapted it, As I Lay Dying by Faulkner at that point. And I really appreciated the collaborative process and how ideas that I wouldn't generate on my own, would happen in collaborations, and material would be taken in directions that I wouldn't conceive of if I was just working by myself. And so, there was something, I just felt like there was something just not attractive to me about adapting my own book, that it would be in the best, I could do it, but it would just be kind of one more iteration of me, I guess. And so I thought I wanted somebody else to do it, and really not long after that, I was introduced to Gia by her mother, Jackie Getty. It almost feels like it was like fate or something, because I'd never met Gia before, and earlier in the day, I was at this deli in LA called Jones on 3rd, and like these kids came in. I was there with my old girlfriend, and we were eating, and these young kids, they weren't teens, but these young kids came in, and they just there was something about them, they were just cool, and they like caught my eye for whatever reason. They were just like, oh, look at these. There was 8 of them, and I was like, oh, those are cool kids. And then that night, it was the gala at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and we went to the after party, and Jackie introduced me to Gia, and I was like, hey, you were you at Jones on 3rd? And she's like, yeah. I was like, oh, you're one of those cool kids? She's like, I guess. And then we just started talking, and in that conversation, she said she loved Freaks and Geeks, which was sort of a good reference eventually for this. And then I asked her what she was up to, and she had just graduated with a degree in photography. And so about a week later, I saw some of her photos, and they were really kind of images like the images in the movie, largely like glimpses at teen life, but with a sort of dreamy quality, or something a little elevated about them. And I just thought that was the right sensibility for this. It would sort of match the sensibility that I was trying to capture in the book. And so I just had a good feeling. Sometimes sometimes I am impulsive, and sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it really worked. And I wrote her, and I said, I have this book. I think you're the right person to adapt it. What do you think? And she said, well, I never thought about directing a movie. Of course, my family's all about movies, but I never thought about doing it myself. And but I'm interested. And she read the book and really liked it, and started like a 4 or 5 year process of getting to here. And I really kind of I teach filmmaking, and so I really worked with her like, I do with my graduate students, where I try to give a lot of freedom, but then there are like checkpoints along the way to just make sure that, they're in line, and that also they're able to get their ideas on the screen. And so I said, here's the book, you can use as much or as little of it as you want. I suggest, starting with the things that really speak to you and that you're passionate about, the stories that you can, that you think you can just work with best. And so she came up with the script, and then eventually I had her do a test, and she shot and edited a 45-minute piece. Her friend Natalie Love was the star of this test. She has a small part in this. She works at the convalescent home. And so with these tests, they're like low budget. They don't use any of the locations, don't use any of the real actors. But the director goes out, and I have them shoot all the shots that they're thinking about and use all the dialogue in the script. And it's a way for me to see if what's in her head is getting on screen, and is also if it's working, so it takes it out of, because it's a film. We're working in the medium of filmmaking. So I just like to get past the discussions at the script stage, because after a while, to me, it just feels like it's conjecture, and somebody's like, well, your first act needs, earlier kind of climax or whatever, and it's just like in the script stage, if we were working on a novel, okay, it would make sense to argue about the script, but like if you can actually get it on the screen, then everybody can just see it and be like, oh, that does work, or it doesn't work, So once I saw her test, I knew that she had it. She just, she was ready, and it was also, kind of a rehearsal for her, because she'd never been on a set as director before. She grew up on sets, but never, she had never been the director, and so it was a chance for her to kind of just, in a low pressure situation, start directing people and making decisions and being the leader. And if you know Gia, she's pretty soft spoken, and so I think it was good for her to just have that in a low pressure situation. And then once I saw that, I just said, you got this, and cast whoever you want, and just shoot it and make it however you want. I have total faith.
So she cast you as the creepy sucker.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't want to play the role, but I was super supportive of this movie. Like I'm sure she could have gotten help from her family to make the movie, but I think I haven't really even discussed it with her, but it seems to me like it was important for her to be able to. She certainly got a lot of help from her grandfather, and he's just an amazing artist, and I think like even when she was adapting the book into a screenplay, he brought out the Godfather book with all the notes, and like the way he did it, he would cut out each page and then paste it on a regular typewriter page, and then make all his notes around it and specific notes. And I actually eventually saw that, but so he showed her how to do that. So I guess she did that with my book, and so he was very helpful. But she couldn't get the money for a while, and so eventually I was just tired of waiting, and I was just like, people were saying like, well, she's a first-time director, like, if you direct it, you get the money or whatever. And I was just like, no, this is the way that we're gonna do it. So I eventually just did this movie called Homefront with Jason Statham, and I gave her my part of my salary and to make this movie. And so I was, super supportive of the movie, and so I didn't intend to be in. I wasn't intending to be in it, and she'd run names by me, like for Mr. B, Anna said, he's cool, he'd be great, and blah, blah. And then after a month, she said, she's really shy. And she's like, James, maybe she was just buttering me up. I don't know. She's like, James, you're my favorite actor, and I really would like you to play Mr. B. And like, oh God, because that character is in the book is based on somebody real, loosely based. This guy was caught, and he was in this relationship with a girl that was much younger than the character that Emma plays. She was like 13. And it all came out later, like years later, and he got arrested and went to prison. So I felt really weird about playing this guy, and but I wanted to do whatever I could to support the movie, and so I said, all right. And the way to play it, I just thought the context is going to make it creepy, and so I don't, need to add any creep on it. Like, the way to make it even scarier is just like, this guy thinks he's in a normal kind of romantic situation, and so as an actor, just play it like that. Like, he thinks the feelings between them are so deep that he's above the law or whatever. So, so I just played it like any kind of romance.
Well, no, I mean, there's this great moment where when the characters explain to her, how she's good, this look passes over your face where you can sense there's something sort of wrong with this character. It's an extra dimension.
I really think, it's like, yeah, maybe that came out, but I really think it's the context, like, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say, like, all right, there he is doing homework with her, like, all right, anybody would be like, oh, this is a little weird, but as an actor, I didn't have to really play that. Like, the looks would just be interpreted that way because of the context.
Right.
Yeah.
And you actually you went to high school in Palo Alto, right? So,
yeah.
So some of the stories, I mean, I guess are from personal experience or from people you knew, or.
Yeah, I mean, I set my book in Palo Alto in the mid '90s, which is when I was a teenager there, and like most writers, I drew from a lot of it from experiences I had, experiences other people had. And then made some up, and then the way that in my head I could really just get it down, like as a writer, I was having a hard time early on, because I would write stories that were kind of based on experiences I had, but I was this young sensitive dude or whatever, and so I realized I was writing to make readers like me, and I'd make want them to just understand my pain or whatever. And I realized, and I hated it. I hated that kind of material. And I realized, oh no, when I write, it's like, this is where you don't need to prove what a good person you are. This is where you get everything out, and all the darkness can come out. And so I used real experiences, but you recontextualize it, you repurpose those experiences to tell narratives with arcs that weren't necessarily in place in real life. And so, yeah, if you wanted to play the game of going back and meeting people that I knew back then and saying, hey, did that really happen? You could say yes, or like when the book came out, their parents of old friends of mine that are like ask their children, like, oh my God, did that happen? And they'd be like, yeah, but not exactly like that, or whatever. So, and it's fiction, so it's okay. And I really didn't want my mother to read it. She's an author, and strangely, like, I don't know, we're on like similar, I guess it makes sense, we're on similar wavelengths, but like I wrote this book and she had been writing she was a children's book author, and then she had come out with her first young adult novel, which took place in high school, and it was like, oh, we both have our high school novels, and then like she wrote this other book about like this artist, and it was like, I kind of did that, and it was like, oh, Mom, come on. But anyway, like, I didn't want her to read it because she was there when I was a teenager, and so she knew these experiences from when they really happened, and so I felt like, oh God, if she reads them in this book, she's gonna think this is how I actually felt about those real things, and she'll be reading it as if it's like nonfiction. And finally I said, all right, you can read it, but we will never discuss it. She said, okay. So we've never talked about it, but yeah, a lot of it was based on real experiences, and then, but also, I understand that the stories are pretty dark, and it's like, it was never intended to be to capture like the variety of experiences that people have in high school. Like, I'm focusing on a particular kind of, kid and teenager, and I think the intention behind that was to not represent everyone's high school experience, but more kind of how it feels to be in high school, how it can feel, in a similar way to, like, I guess one of my models was Gus Van Sant's movie Paranoid Park, where, this kid accidentally kills somebody and doesn't tell anybody. And for me, that was sort of like objective correlative for what it can feel like to be in high school. Like, sometimes it just feels like you've got the weight of the world on you. And we all hopefully have not killed anybody, but
most of us.
Sometimes it feels like that, like, oh.
Holding a secret in you.
Yeah, and so by piling on dark story on top of dark story, I kind of wanted to give a feeling of how it can be, when you're that age.
I mean, that's something I think comes across. And the movie is so beautiful on so many levels, and it's capturing that kind of tone and all that does so well. I think it might be good to turn it over to the audience for Q&A. So, it's in the front here, please.
When I was doing the scenes with Emma, was it awkward after? Or during or whatever? No, Emma, I mean, she's been around the business for a long time, and so she's got a pretty resilient personality, and in fact, like I was saying before, like, the context is what made everything weird, but we didn't really do that much other than that kind of sex scene on the couch, and in fact, I was there for the wide shot, but for the closer shots, I'm really not there, Gia kind of does this weird POV shot, so we kind of made out a little, but that was it, and I'm she's made out with a few people before me, so it was fine. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really nice piece, and it was awesome to show it here at Lincoln Center. It's a tricky thing because it's material that is repurposed, but it's material owned by another company, and so we kind of got permission. The fact that Gus even had those old reels, was kind of against the rules. Like, he wasn't supposed to have that, but it's a tricky thing. I did put it out. There's a very limited art book called Moving Pictures, Moving Sculptures that has 4 DVDs in it, and it's on one of those. So, but there were only like maybe 1,000 of those that are put out. But if you see one online, snatch it up because it's on there. There's a lot of valuable material on those DVDs.
So the law of attraction states that basically your thoughts are put into your work. Like, like, so your work is based upon what you're thinking in life, and for you to add almost every chapter for it to be like involving death and violence and stuff like that, like, was that stuff that was going on in your life? Not obviously like death, but like the fact that you just had a lot of anger in that book, basically. I know like most of it is true, but some of it's not. But.
Some of it's not. Like Halloween, I didn't kill anybody, but
Because I tried to look up your paintings too during the time of you writing the book, and I wanted to see if like you're also showing that side in your paintings. But
I think, you know, part of it was that idea of the paranoid park idea of the secret, and I guess Halloween, that story really is almost a model of paranoid park. It's the secret. But some of the other things, some of the more other violent things, or some of the other deaths in the book actually did happen. Now Palo Alto is one of the best cities in the country, so I wasn't. I'm not trying to say like Palo Alto is like a badass place or anything like that. I think what I liked was the contrast between a place like Palo Alto and some of these kind of darker things that I felt are just kind of more universal, that there is something about, coming of age, becoming an adult, that there is a kind of scary, almost violence when you're coming of age and you're still a kid, but some of your decisions are going to have big, large effects on the rest of your life. And there's something kind of crazy and violent about that. And then also the idea that, in like a public school puts you together in close proximity to a group of people that you don't necessarily have anything in common with, and you're pushed up against them every day. And so that is also, to me, like a weird kind of violence where, and you also don't, generally, this is just generally speaking, you don't have a bigger perspective of the world, like I didn't travel much out of Palo Alto before I was 18, and so you don't understand, like, oh, there are other like-minded people out there. Now, that's when I was a teen, the internet and social networking is, I think, one of the most positive things about that is that you can find your group online. You don't have to be so isolated anymore. And like, there's that movie Zoo. I don't know if you know that documentary Zoo, but like about these guys that have sex with horses. But like,
I'm familiar with it.
the beautiful thing about
I've seen it. That's all I mean.
It's actually beautifully shot.
Robinson
but,
DeVore.
Yeah. But like, one of the, I thought, beautiful things about it was that all these guys that would have just lived these miserable lives in isolation before the internet now all found each other, and they'd like travel across the country to meet and have these horse sex parties. But anyway, when you're young, you don't, at least I didn't have a bigger kind of perspective of the world, and so everything feels more intense than it should be, and scarier than it should be, and there's a violence in that. But as a writer, it's one of the reasons I was drawn to it. It's like if you have characters that whose emotions are ratcheted up so high over the smallest things, it just inherently helps you with drama, and it creates drama.
Well, Romeo and Juliet as teenagers.
Yeah, exactly.
We have time.
Like if they were old, yeah, Romeo and Juliet were a little older, like
Yeah.
there's no drama.
They'd just be applying to college. Time for just one more question, unfortunately. Let's go to the back if we can. On the aisle there on the right.
The book's set in the 90s, but the movie is a little more present day. There are cell phones, there's texting and that kind of thing. And so what was the idea behind that? And it's a good question. So when I asked Gia to do it, early on there were discussions of like, oh, you go shoot it in Palo Alto or not? And even, the title was up in the air for a while, and then, what time period do we set it in? And I just eventually said, you know what? It's fine if, you shoot it in LA. It's fine if you make it more present day. Because that was Gia's experience. She's about 10 years younger than I am. And so I wanted her to be able to layer her experience of high school and youth on top of it, and so that it wouldn't be her just trying to recapture my youth, that it would be kind of both of our experiences in there. But that being said, in other ways it does feel a little more timeless, which I think is also good. Like I know I wanted some things about my book to be very specific about time and place. But in other ways, I did want it to be more universal, and not just more universal about teens, but that I thought, teens would be a great form to just talk about what it is to be human. Like I'm still doing a lot of the self-defining and the growth that I was doing back then, and all the things that I loved back then, I love now. And so I just felt like if I use teens, I want to use them in a way that, they speak more about just what it is to be human and who we align ourselves with, how we define ourselves, what's important to us. It's just that with teens, to me, it was more interesting, at least at the time, because everything is still pretty new, and there are a lot of new experiences happening at that time. And so maybe you're less ingrained in certain kind of behaviors or certain ways of living. But that's all to say, I wanted it to be more universal, so that if Gia wanted to kind of change the time a little bit, that was fine with me, because it wasn't exactly, even though the title is Palo Alto, it is about Palo Alto, and it also isn't.
That's all the time we have, I'm afraid. But James, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. All right. Thanks for having me.